Okay, monthly budget report. Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones, you, staff, whoever you, looks like you're,
No, I'm flying solo here today, but Deborah Jacobson is with her son and her granddaughter in Indiana, so I
she
don't have
did an
her here to
awesome
support
job
me.
filling in
I know,
board meeting.
yeah, so I'm going to try to cover for her today, do that. So Deputy Superintendent of Operations Scott Jones, in the interest of time, but it is required that I must attest to you, which I am doing so right now, that the Utah State Board of Education is able to meet all of its fiduciary commitments and responsibilities and obligations. We're not aware of any issues at this time regarding the budget. So with that, I'll just pause, go back to you, Chair, and see if there's any questions or concerns with what is in your backups and is public facing for the third month of this fiscal year 23, September's report.
Board members, any questions regarding the monthly budget report? Seeing none, please continue.
Also, I need to point out that the update on the COVID relief funds, the ARP, ESSER funds, is also available for you and the public to review. We only do a deeper dive once a quarter, so that backup is just available as a public-facing document. And then I'll just pause here for any questions or concerns if any board members had a chance to review it and do have any questions on our status of COVID, ARP, ESSER funds.
I'm not seeing any questions, and
Okay.
and again, that's looking forward-facing just for the public, and then also the
Yep.
legislature also likes to see that
Right.
in the public view, so it is.
So with your permission, sir, I'll segue to the discretionary funds
Hang on,
report.
we
Oh,
do.
okay.
I didn't
Oh,
see the light.
sorry.
Hang on, we have a question.
Okay.
I
From Member
just
Lear.
have one short question that is a question that I've been asking every time these issues come up. Is it still true, last time we heard that there were only one or two LEAs that had not availed themselves of use of these funds? Is that still true?
Sure.
Has there been any change to that?
Chair, if you'll recognize Sarah Harward, please.
Yes.
Thank you, Sarah Harward, CARES Educational Specialist here at the Utah State Board of Education. Would you mind just repeating the question?
I just recall hearing last time that there were one or two LEAs that had not availed themselves of these funds, and I wanted to see if that's still an accurate number.
Thank you.
Please
May I answer?
respond.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so as far as where we are at with the CARES funds, the ESSER 1 and ESSER 2, or ESSER 1 Gear 1 funds, I'm assuming that's the ones you're asking about, the ones that ended September 30th. We are wrapping up. We have, it's accurate as for today, I double checked this morning, what's in backup, where we have 11 LEAs with remaining funds with our ESSER 1 90% award, 3 with the ESSER 1 base, and we have 25 LEAs that still have at least 1 penny or more to request for the Gear 1. So we're working with those LEAs really closely. They're getting, for the past month, they've been getting October, they've been getting weekly emails. Now they're getting phone calls. So we are bugging them about these funds, making sure that they're going to request these funds. So we got 2 more weeks that we would like to see them request these funds. So yeah, they're getting phone calls this week that we're working with them.
So I just want to be clear, so 23 have not requested them? Is that what you're saying?
Chair, can I answer?
Yes.
Okay, so they can request, they don't have to request the whole award at once. And so there's 25 who have not requested the full award. They have requested some of it. They just haven't, one of them's got like $18 left. Some have like 6,000. So there's, yeah, everyone's requested at least something. But those are just the LEAs that have more than a penny left to
Oh,
request.
that's helpful, thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, that's all, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Chair, if there's no further questions, I can segue to the discretionary funds report for board
Please
member and
do.
public review. The discretionary funds report is just that. It's a discretionary amount of funds across various fund sources, state, federal mineral lease. In the upper right-hand corner, you can see that there's remaining funds available. I would just encourage or ask board members to, if you have any ideas or recommendations on the use of those remaining funds there, Also, and I'm not sure if it was updated in this report, I didn't get a chance to check with Deborah, but internal audit is returning roughly $200,000 of carry forward money to go into this fund as well. So I'll make sure I update you on the status of that in December. But, I mean, the reason why I point this out is that it just goes to show the fiduciary responsibility of our section. So kudos to Chief Audit Executive Davis and her tracking dollar for dollar her budget, and then making it more available to go into the remaining if it's not there already. But, I'll double check with Deborah on that. So, between now and the next meeting, we're getting halfway through. December marks our halfway month or halfway point through the fiscal year. So if we could get some, commitments out there on those remaining funds, it helps. We don't want to spend money just to spend money, but, I just need to call your attention to the availability of those funds across those particular fund sources out there for anything that you feel would benefit our students or educators out there in the field. Staff are willing to go the additional miles to get those funds committed or obligated for any purpose that you deem appropriate and necessary for the use of those funds. Subject to any questions or concerns, Chair, I'll pause for any on the discretionary funds report itself.
So what Deputy Superintendent Jones is saying here, there's an open invitation that if you have an idea or something that you want to move forward to the board to use these discretionary funds, and some of them are restricted in how they could be spent, that invitation's there. You can talk to Deputy Superintendent Jones, you can talk to somebody through leadership, but we have prioritized things in the past and on these funds. So that is what's being politely said, because we're getting halfway through, and if there's something we need to do, let's get the funds encumbered. But again, it's just not to spend, and it is nice to have a contingency for some emergency, but we do have opportunities to move some betterments forward if you have a project or something. So let's see, we've got a light. Member Lear.
And I just wanted to ask Deputy Jones, if these funds are not spent by the board, they will go, what happens to them?
So they are subject to being quote-unquote swept and then, reappropriated back into the Uniform School Fund. We've been very, the legislative fiscal analyst has been very supportive of not doing that, because they do see that eventually, they get committed, they get obligated. That's just why I put this out to you, is just to ensure that, we're following process and utilizing the funds. We're always at risk, so to speak, of them being swept, especially when we get to the end of the fiscal year, because we do have to report whatever balances are not obligated or not committed. As you know, these are non-lapsing funds, so they can continue over into years. But if we don't find a project for them and use them appropriately or allowably, then they are subject to being swept at the end of a fiscal year. So, but it hasn't happened, other than when we hit the COVID year, there was some sweeping of funds, but we got it back. But there is risk of that if we don't commit it. That's why I make the point of saying we're halfway through the fiscal year, so it would help to get those committed or obligated. So, yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you, good question.
Yeah. So, sir, that concludes the monthly budget report. I do want to just add one thing. I have been getting a lot of questions on where we're at with new estimates. I just encourage board members through the chair to, so we have an EAC meeting, the legislature has an Executive Appropriations Committee meeting in November, and then they meet again in December. The year-end revenue, it's called a TC-23 form, and we'll make sure we get that out to you. But subject to, board leadership approval, it's the December meeting that I request that as either part of this agenda item or its own separate item, we update you on where EAC is at with revenue. We also just published the student counts, so questions on those student counts. We try to roll that all into your December meeting, either as part of the monthly budget report on that. So we are going to address revenue and the student counts and what the impacts are. I can see that Sam's probably just overfilled with joy and wonder at the fact that he's just been volunteered to do that. with Del Frost. So, you know, again, though, it's subject to leadership approving the agenda item. But I just wanted to make sure, Chair, that board members know that the timing of it, usually it's more value add that we do or address revenue, student counts and things during your December meeting, because we want to see where EAC is at in their November meeting, which is not until the 15th. So it's after this meeting, but we're moving towards that, again, subject to approval. We'll get it on the agenda or, you know, work on that, so.
It'll be on the agenda. There's a lot of things people look forward
Yep.
to in December,
Right,
as many of you are aware, and our duties and responsibilities of being board members here, that's a big ticketed item that deserves a lot of attention, and we're anxious to get that report, and
yes, sir.
so it'll definitely be there.
Okay, so that concludes the monthly budget report and the discretionary funds report. So subject to your direction, so we can turn it over for the ESSA agenda item
We
to
do have a question or
Superintendent
comment,
Nielsen.
Member Cannon?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I was just anticipating the ESSA
Yeah, okay.
item.
So and I
I
believe
have a
that's
question on
Superintendent
that.
Nielsen, sir.
Okay,
Yep.
well, let's move then
Okay, and board-
to
okay.
5.3. We'll invite Assistant Superintendents Nielsen and Voorhees up to, and we kind of primed the pump last board meeting on this agenda. We appreciate that. So I don't know who wants to speak first to this, a little background on what's going to be before the board, and I'm sure there's quite a few questions, so.
Yeah, I expect so as well. I'm Darren Nielsen, Assistant Superintendent of Student Learning for the Utah State Board of Education, and Leah Voorhees, Assistant Superintendent of Student Support Services, are happy to be before you today. I'm wondering if whoever has control of the screen would be willing to release that. I've got a few slides to kind of ground us, and some of these might answer questions that board members have on their minds, and it might also stimulate additional questions to help you with your decision-making process. Give me just a moment. Okay. I think it's always important to remember that while Assistant Superintendent Voorhees and I are sitting before you today, and we had the privilege of coming before you last month, the work that's represented in the proposed amendments to the ESSA plan represents a significant number of people. Approximately 29 of your staff have been working on this, have responsibilities for one or more part of the plan. Your Assessment Accountability Policy Advisory Committee, who meets regularly throughout the year, have addressed some of these topics for more than a year. And then the coordinators that your staff works with from the LEAs, including assessment directors, English language directors, curriculum directors, have been informed and we've been receiving feedback and working with them, again, throughout this process. So while we're here, I want you to know we have an army of people behind us that have informed the work that you've reviewed in this plan. So just for everyone's sake, to get us grounded, Utah State Board of Education has an ESSA plan that's been approved. It's approved in July of 2018. The plan describes how all of the title funds that the board oversees, how those funds are going to be spent. And there is obviously a requirement that those funds are aligned with the requirements of each of those programs. And then the State Board of Education on that plan formatted on this template that allows for the consolidation of all of the separate plans. That's not a requirement, but most states do that, and Utah did that back in 2018. And the board has a very specific role in this, and there's defined processes in making changes, both creating the plan originally and making changes to it. The Board of Education has the authority to create the plan and choose, which outlines how those funds are going to be spent. The state plan has to incorporate public comment and input from parents, teachers, and policymakers. And when the original plan was created, that was an extensive, I believe, a full-year process. I worked in Box Elder School District at the time, and I know I was invited to participate in a number of different groups to help formulate that original plan. And then the approval of those plans needs to occur in a public meeting. This is the timeline. We talked about this last month, so I'm not going to go over it in detail other than we're going to focus in on the public comment. What we'd requested or notified the board of last month is that we were going to open the plan up for public comment, and I'm going to talk about the responses that we've received. Those have been uploaded to your civic clerks. You may have read all of them individually. I'll try to summarize the two major themes that came from those public comment. Just a reminder, what we talked about last month as well, the addendums for the COVID-19 disruptions in 2020 and 2021 were really the trigger for your staff examining the plan. It required us to make changes to the long-term goals because of the suspension of assessment in 2020 and the disruption that created in 2021 as far as accountability. While in that process, staff worked on updating the plan to align with the current board legislative directives and to look for overall improvements, ways that we could make positive changes to the plan, and then also to remove elements of the plan that weren't necessarily required. Board Member Earl has talked to us about that. She brought this up in Assessment Accountability Policy Advisory Committee, and there are places in the plan you'll see where we went, staff went in and are recommending paring that down so it doesn't contain unnecessary text of things that aren't required. So public comment, we received a number of responses. I think the total amount was in the 70s. We had teachers were our primary group of respondents. We had 13 administrators, 12 parents, and then 6 in another category. People were able to review the plan, and they could leave narrative comments, or they could just exit after reviewing the plan. We had 38 respondents provided written narrative about what they thought about the recommendations that were being proposed. By far, the area of the plan that received public comment was this area, and that is where we are recommending adjusting the definition of English proficiency to an overall proficiency level of 4.2 or greater and a 3.5 or greater in the speaking domain. These 33 comments, almost all of them came in on the very last day of public comment and from the same school. So it happens that that school is in my neighborhood. It's the school where my children went to school. So I went and met with Tiffany Farnsworth and Sherry Gallup, who were the EL coordinators in that school. It also caught my attention that their comments were not consistent with the comments from their district level EL coordinator or the feedback we'd received in the survey up to that point. So I was interested to better understand their concerns. There are really two buckets that their staff within that school expressed concerns about. They perceived that the expectation was being lowered, which is difficult to, in a survey, communicate all of the work that's been done to get to a point where we're making a very specific recommendation like this. And then they perceived that the supports would be removed from students that need them. Remembering that for students who are identified as English language students, when they exit that program, currently if they have a composite score of 5 only, they exit and there's a requirement that schools put them in monitoring status for 4 years. During that monitoring status, those students can be moved back into receiving direct services, or the schools can provide other scaffoldings of services. So as I talked to these particular teachers who have a perspective and a concern that was different than the rest of the state that we'd received, it became clear that the way they perceive funding flowing in their district, they were worried about a reduction of funding for the services they're providing to the students. There are no changes. Changing this criteria does not change the level of services that schools are required to provide to students who are identified as EL or that are in the monitoring status. In terms of perceiving that the expectations being lowered, as I visited with them, I reviewed with them some of the discussion that had occurred in a previous Assessment Accountability Policy Advisory technical meeting, and also our Technical Assistance Committee meeting with that group that comes and services our state and helps us make good decisions around accountability and assessment. There is some belief that when the WIDA assessment scores were cut, the cut scores were established, that there was some errors in that process, which explains why there's less than a handful of states that use 5 composite score as their exit criteria. We also saw in analyzing our last 5 years of data on our students who've been learning English that there is possible that some of them have exited with a composite score of 5 because of the weighting of the subscores to exit with a composite score of 5 and still not be proficient in their speaking language, which surprised me that could happen. So the recommendation that's come in before you today as part of the overall recommendations, staff and the groups that you've established to help provide these kind of recommendations do not believe that we're lowering the expectation for our students, and there's been data modeling to examine that. There's no changes around the supports that go in place. However, LEAs do determine how they fund these programs. These two ladies that I worked with are funded in part, they indicated, through Title I service money. Also, the Teacher Student Success Act funds help pay for their salaries at that school. That has over 100 students that are designated as learning English. The changes you're making today doesn't change that, and it doesn't require districts to change the structures that they have for funding those programs, but that's the root of the concern around supports being removed from the students. And that's a summary of where we've been since the last time we were before you, and we certainly are open for questions. And we have other staff members who I believe are close by who can answer some of the really program-specific questions that you may have.
And before we get to questions, Assistant Superintendent Voorhees, your light is on. Is that so that you can participate, or did you have something more you wanted to add?
No, sorry, sir, it was on when I came
Oh,
up
no, you're
here.
fine. Okay, okay. Member Earl.
Yeah, as I read down through this, there's some interesting dynamics, and thank you, Darren, for articulating some of those things in there. As you go through, it's very technical, it seems. I just had a couple of maybe statements as well as maybe some questions. What is the actual money we're getting for these programs in ESSA? What is the composite money we're getting from the federal government?
So your question, Darren, do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, I can give you an estimate. Last month, before I came to the table, I asked Assistant Superintendent Deborah Jacobson if she could tell me how much total title money comes to the State Board of Education. She indicated it was approximately 120,000, or I mean 100
20 million?
120 million.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay. As I read through it, I guess in my mind I thought, what doesn't this ESSA program, what doesn't it direct? In other words, whatever we do in Utah is correlated to the federal $120 million to the point where I think we even make it our law. And I appreciate, I reached out to Sarah at the end of last week and just said, or Sarah Young, and asked her, I said, how much, and the question, I asked Brian this too, Brian Quisenberry, what is the legal requirements here, right? And it, it's non-compliance would be repayment of money. And the reason why I asked is because when I went back through what we originally had, within about 6 to 9 months, we were already out of compliance, if that makes any sense. Like, we'd already changed a whole bunch of things. The laws had already changed in Utah. And by the time we updated this again, we had all these changes again that to put it more in compliance, and grateful that we've been careful to only put the things in that are relevant. We didn't give more than we had to, at least from what I could see. That's a lot to see, though. But I guess my overall question, or I don't even know if it's a question, a statement, is that concern of who are we accountable to? And, I'd love to write an accountability program to our families and to our, to our children and see what that looks like versus an accountability program to the federal government. Because I feel like when I read through that, I'm like, what don't they have their hands in when it comes to system? Anyways, and I suppose this is just a general statement. I do appreciate the hard work of all the staff, the thoroughness, the making sure it aligns with our laws, even in here, which I am appreciative of this too, where it says, there's parts in here where we're going to give different numbers to the federal government because they require different than what we are actually reporting to our state because our state law requires different. I'm appreciative that we can acknowledge that, and I guess I just have a concern of the minimal amount of money in our overall funding for the state of Utah and the maximum amount of control that we're allowing this to take place. And I think there should be some dialogue around how do we use our own monies in the state of Utah and direct our own programming. I don't suggest we would do much, we may not do anything different, but it's the fact that we can make the changes and we're accountable to ourselves, and we're not accountable to someone who's very distant from our families. So anyways, those are my statements. Thank you.
Member Cannon?
Thank you, Darren. You spoke a little bit. I went through and read public comment, and so my hair sort of stood on end. I thought, so then I started in on the 188-page document and got through, into the 30s. But I was trying to find in that document where the perception that the expectation was being lowered was, and that the financial supports the ELL kids received would be removed. So can you give me some reassurance around those 2 points? I know you mentioned them, but is the expectation being lowered?
Darren?
Yeah, we're making the case that in fact it's not. And when we apply if we go back to the last 5 years of our implementation of this plan with the 5.0 and then model what it would look like if we change this, it does change some degree the number, the individual students who are exiting and what time they're exiting. The perception, though, is when you have from the public or educators, you see a cut score of 5, and now you show that the cut score's reduced to that, you're perceiving that that's being lowered, when in fact adding the speaking domain, we believe is actually keeping the rigor the same. Part of the goal of this expectation that's established in the plan, and we get to decide, the state board gets to decide where the cut score is or the exit criteria, is to ensure that when we indicate to a student and their parents that they no longer need to receive direct support for learning English. And what that looks like in a secondary school is they most likely don't have to take a specific class where they're separated from the general population and instructed in English language proficiency. That when we tell them, wherever that cut score is, that they're ready to move forward, that they can access, what we're saying is, we believe you can access the core language that's available in our schools without specific, we all need scaffolding supports, even students who aren't learning English, but specific to their need to acquire speaking, reading, listening, and reading English skills.
So let me feed this back to you, see if I understand. That we used to have an overall proficiency level of 5, but we have changed that to 4.2 and added another component, the other component being proficiency in speaking.
Correct.
Okay, so that actually boosts, they cannot just get away with not knowing how to speak English. Okay, thank you. And then will you also address for me the supports? There was fear that the supports that supported the ELL kids were being removed.
Yeah, and when I met with these two wonderful ladies who have a great program, they're meeting the needs again, and they have a significant population of students learning English. When I tried to get to the root cause of their concern, it was that the district would remove funding for one or more of their positions or other services that are being funneled into the school. When we talked about the funding source for their positions, Teacher-Student Success Act and some Title III funds. The Title III funds are established through this plan, but you'll see that the ability for LEAs to spend those monies is not dictated in the plan. So the LEA still gets to decide when they have the funding formula distributed to them how they're going to allocate that or what formula they'll use to distribute those funds within their LEA. And then how they can use other funds. So Title I was another funding source they mentioned. They're a Title I school, so there's nothing that prohibits them from using, and their district isn't, they're using Title I funds. They're doing what we would think would be a model. They're braiding funds from different sources to meet the needs of their students, whether they're English language students or other categories. And you'll see in the plan, one of the reasons you couldn't see anything there is there's no criteria within this plan that places a restriction on LEAs of how they use those funds.
Okay, thanks very much.
Any other questions? This is an actionable item. I just want to weigh in on it was interesting, it was not too long ago, the Federalism Commission called us in. And I was at the table, another board member was also at the table, and they've addressed concern about the federal dollars coming in and in that space. There was also a very open, my parting comment was a very open invitation to the Federalism Commission. Let's get down in the weeds in this. If the state wants to come up with an alternative solution to these title funds, and it seemed to be very well received, but we'll see where that goes. But that invitation was there, and hopefully with the legislature, if they want to do something big and bold, and that they take advantage of that invitation to do something different. So everyone's awareness was heightened that yes, that these dollars are needed, but at the same time, how do you backfill them and where, and what's the vehicle on the state side? So hopefully this next year, something can come from that dialogue or invitation that was accepted to come to the table. So, but I appreciate your work also that's on this. I'm not going to speak because we don't have a motion on the table. Member Cannon?
Yes, I would like to make a motion that the board approve the November 2022 Every Student Succeeds Act revision for submission to the U.S. Department of Education.
Second. Do you want to speak to the motion?
I believe that Darren did a good job in answering the questions and concerns I have, so I now feel like I can vote in favor of this.
Okay. Member Earl?
I will not be voting in favor of this, but I just want to explain my vote. It has nothing to do with the work of the staff or any of the organizations that way. I just think we need to be moving in a different direction. So that would be my vote, so.
Okay, not seeing any. I'm not seeing any other comments. The motion before the board is that the board approve the November 2022 ESSA revision for submission to the U.S. Department of Education. It's worded a little bit different, but you support that in a second? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. The noes, excuse me, I'm losing my voice. The noes, we have the two. Okay, thank you. The motion passes. Members, we're going to take a 10-minute break, but we're going to start promptly 10 minutes from now, so at 25 till. So if you can set your timer or help each other get back in here, that would be good. We'll be moving to our next agenda item.